A top streamer promised his followers a legendary prank, aiming his camera at the tomb's silent sentinel. In this sacred place, however, some lines aren't meant to be crossed, and the price for viral fame would be absolute humiliation. The November air was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of cold stone and damp earth. At Arlington National Cemetery, the early morning sun hung low in a pale sky, casting long, somber shadows that stretched like ghosts across the perfectly aligned rows of white headstones. The fiery red of the maple trees stood in stark, almost violent, contrast to the disciplined green of the lawns and the solemn white of the marble. This was a place of profound silence, a sprawling library where each headstone was a volume of sacrifice. At its heart, polished and pristine under the weak autumn light, lay the tomb of the unknown soldier. Cutting through this reverent quiet was Ethan Vance, a 22-year-old known to his millions of followers as ETV. He was a creature of the digital age, a walking, talking embodiment of manufactured chaos. His hair was a shock of electric blue, styled into carefully disheveled spikes. He wore an oversized, brightly patterned hoodie that seemed to scream for attention, a stark rebellion against the muted tones of the cemetery. He held his phone out on a gimbal, his face, framed for his live stream, plastered with a wide, manic grin. Trailing a few steps behind, her expression a tight knot of anxiety, was his girlfriend and camerawoman, Maya. "All right, ETV crew, we are live from the most serious place on earth." Ethan's voice was a loud, energetic whisper, a sound that grated against the hallowed calm. A few nearby visitors turned, their faces a mixture of curiosity and immediate disapproval. The challenge: make the unblinking soldier blink. The goal: 10 million subs by tonight. This is going to be legendary. Maya adjusted the focus on the second camera, her own phone, try to keep it steady. "Ethan, please, your voice," she murmured, her eyes darting nervously towards the other visitors. This feels wrong. Look at this place. Can't we just do a respectful history vlog or something?" "Respectful is boring, May." Ethan shot back, not taking his eyes off his own screen, where a cascade of fire emojis and hyped comments was already flooding the chat. Boring doesn't break the internet. People want conflict. They want to see rules get broken. You know the algorithm. Just trust me. 30 yards away, Sergeant Thomas Tom Rourke stood his post. At 30, his face was a portrait of disciplined composure. Lean and angular, but a thin, silvery scar cut a faint line across his jaw, a subtle memento from a dusty street in Ramadi. His uniform was an artifact of perfection. The creases in his dress blues were sharp enough to slice paper. His white gloves were immaculate. The M14 rifle at his shoulder was held with a familiarity that felt less like a tool and more like an extension of his own body. His gaze, shielded by reflective sunglasses, was fixed on a point in the middle distance, but his senses were alive, cataloging every whisper, every shuffle of feet on the plaza. He had seen people like Ethan before, tourists who saw the solemnity not as a tribute, but as a backdrop for their own trivial performances. His duty was not to them. It was to the silent brothers he guarded, and to a promise sealed in blood and conviction. Nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, stood Mr. Samuel Jones. He was a man in his late 70s, his posture still retaining a hint of military bearing. A small, unassuming pin on the lapel of his tweed coat, a symbol of his service in the dense jungles of Vietnam, was his only adornment. He watched the precise, rhythmic ceremony of the guard change, his thoughts with friends whose names were etched into a black wall not far from here. His quiet contemplation was broken by Ethan's disruptive presence. A deep frown creased Mr. Jones's weathered face. He recognized the boy's brand of casual arrogance. It was the ignorance of someone who had never known true sacrifice. "Okay, stream, check this dude out," Ethan narrated, zooming in on Sergeant Rourke. He began to mimic the guard's solemn 21-step patrol on the black mat, but his version was a clumsy, exaggerated parody, his knees kicking up high and his arms swinging wildly. The comments on his live stream exploded with laughing emojis. In the real world, however, the effect was jarring. The hushed reverence of the crowd soured. A young couple moved away, pulling their child closer. The air grew tense. The stage was set, and the line between entertainment and desecration was about to be crossed. "I don't know, Ethan." Maya's voice was strained, her camera wavering as she watched him. "People are staring. This is disrespectful." "It's content, Maya. Relax," he hissed, flashing a quick, annoyed glance at her before turning his charm back to his phone. "The ETV crew loves it. That's what matters." He continued his mockery, moving along the edge of the public area, treating Sergeant Rourke as a non-playable character in his personal video game. "All right, guys, let's break down his specs," Ethan said into his phone, adopting the tone of a sports commentator. "We've got the level 100 stoic face, the plus 50 intimidation sunglasses, and the epic loot M14 rifle. His patrol route is on a fixed loop. Seriously, is this guy even real, or is he an animatronic? Let me know in the chat." Mr. Jones's frown deepened into a scowl. He watched the young man's antics, and his mind drifted back to a sweltering hillside in the Ashau Valley. He remembered a young corporal from Ohio, barely 19, standing watch with that exact same unwavering posture, a posture that wasn't a performance, but a shield against the paralyzing fear that stalked them in the dark. That stance was a testament to a discipline forged in the crucible of absolute terror. "He thinks it's a show," Mr. Jones muttered quietly, as if speaking to the ghost beside him. He has no idea what that uniform cost. The atmosphere on the plaza had curdled completely. The initial whispers of annoyance had turned into a thick, disapproving silence. Parents began to quietly steer their children towards the exit, their expressions grim. A father knelt, his arm around his young son's shoulders, and whispered, "That man is a real soldier, a guardian. He's here to protect the memory of heroes. We show him our respect by being quiet." The boy nodded, his eyes wide, looking from the ridiculous antics of Ethan to the stone-like figure of the guard. From a discreet position near the amphitheater steps, Park Ranger Isabella Rossi watched the situation unfold. Her stance was relaxed, but her eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. She had dealt with every kind of tourist, from the ignorant to the entitled. But Ethan's behavior was different. It wasn't a simple mistake born of unfamiliarity. It was a deliberate, performative act of disrespect, fueled by a live, digital audience. Her hand rested calmly on her hip, inches from her radio. The digital encouragement of his followers was like gasoline on a fire. The viewer count on Ethan's stream was climbing rapidly, breaking his personal record. He felt invincible. "Okay, you guys are Wilden in the chat." He laughed, reading a dare from his screen. "Someone just triple dared me to get a selfie with him. Challenge accepted." Before Maya could even form a protest, Ethan moved. With a fluid, athletic motion, he hopped over the low, velvet rope chain that marked the boundary of the restricted area. He landed softly on the hallowed ground of the plaza, a defiant grin on his face. The collective gasp from the crowd was sharp and immediate. "Ethan, get back here now." Maya's voice was a frantic hiss, full of genuine fear. "You're going to be arrested. This isn't a joke anymore." He turned, walking backwards towards the silent guard, his eyes locked on his phone's camera lens. "It's all part of the show, babe," he whispered, winking at his audience. "They'll just give me a slap on the wrist. The footage will be worth it." The line had not just been crossed. It had been leaped over with gleeful abandon. The moment Ethan's feet touched the restricted granite of the plaza, Ranger Isabella Rossi was in motion. She moved not with haste, but with a swift, undeniable purpose that commanded attention. She closed the distance in seconds, her face calm, but her eyes carrying the full weight of her federal authority. "Sir," she said, her voice even and low, yet it cut through the tense air with absolute clarity. "You are in a restricted area. Step back behind the barrier immediately." Ethan spun around, his face a carefully constructed mask of wide-eyed innocence. "Oh my goodness, officer, I am so sorry," he gushed, placing a hand dramatically over his heart. "I was just so overcome with emotion." Seeing this hero up close, his dedication, I just wanted to capture it for my followers to show them what true American patriotism looks like. Total respect, I swear. He was performing for two audiences now. The ranger in front of him and the thousands watching him on a live stream. Ranger Rossi's expression did not change. She didn't acknowledge his apology or his theatrical display of patriotism. Her gaze was as unyielding as the marble tomb, behind a barrier. Now, with a theatrical sigh for his viewers, Ethan complied, hopping back over the chain. He gave the ranger a dazzling, insincere smile. "Thank you for your service, ma'am," he said, his tone dripping with saccharine sweetness. As soon as Rossi had taken a few steps back to resume her watchful position, Ethan turned his back to her and rolled his eyes for his phone camera. "Well, the fun police are out in force today," he muttered, his voice low enough not to carry. "Total buzzkill. But don't worry, ETV crew. She didn't say I couldn't finish the challenge from here." His eyes gleamed with a reckless light. "And I've saved the best part for last." He swung his designer backpack around to his front and unzipped a side pocket. Maya's face went white as she saw what he was pulling out. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but in this sacred space, it was an object of profound violation. What emerged was a sleek, metallic slingshot. It was a modern, high-tech design, all polished aluminum and black rubber, looking more like a prop from a science fiction movie than child's toy. It gleamed coldly in the autumn light, an instrument of casual cruelty in a place of solemn remembrance. Maya finally found her voice, a desperate, pleading whisper. "Ethan, no. Absolutely not. Put that away. That's assault. That is a federal crime. It's a prank, Maya. It's just a prank," he snapped, his patience with her completely gone. His focus was entirely on his phone, where the viewer count was skyrocketing past a number he'd only ever dreamed of. He was on the verge of creating his masterpiece. He would not be stopped. He reached into his pocket and produced a small, shiny steel ball bearing. The small steel sphere rested in Ethan's palm, a cold, perfect globe of polished metal. It seemed to absorb the solemn light of the morning, holding a distorted reflection of the white tomb and the silent, watching crowd. He held it up for the camera, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Every soldier needs to be tested, right?" he said to his stream, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Let's check the armor rating on this guy. This one is for 10 million subs." The comments on his screen became a frenzied waterfall of shock, dares, and encouragement. A digital mob roaring for blood. Mr. Jones saw the slingshot and the steel ball, and his heart seized. The casual, thoughtless cruelty of it took his breath away. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity, yet this act, in this place, felt like a unique and profound desecration. His body moved before his mind could object. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice cracking with an old man's fury, a sound that carried the weight of a lifetime of respect. "Son, have you no decency? No shame?" But his words were a foreign language to Ethan, lost in the echo chamber of his own ambition. He saw only the screen, the rising numbers, the intoxicating promise of viral immortality. He slotted the ball bearing into the leather pouch of the slingshot, his movements practiced and steady. He raised it, pulling the thick rubber bands taut, aiming with a theatrical flourish. His face was alight with a manic excitement, the perfect, clickable thumbnail for the video that would define his career. "This one's for the algorithm," he yelled, a final, defiant battle cry to his digital army. 3, 2, 1. The rubber bands snapped forward. The steel ball became a silver blur, a streak of light cutting through the crisp autumn air. It flew the 30 yards in an instant. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. The projectile didn't strike Sergeant Rourke's body. Ethan, with a cruel and misguided precision, had aimed for the center of his chest. The steel ball hit the gleaming surface of a metal pin just above the sergeant's heart. The silver star, awarded for valor in the face of the enemy. The sound was shockingly loud in the profound silence. It was not a thud. It was a sharp, piercing ding, a metallic cry of violation that echoed across the stone plaza. It sounded like a bell tolling for the death of decency. In the aftermath of that sound, A vacuum of absolute silence descended. The wind stopped, rustling the leaves. The distant city traffic seemed to fall away. Every person on the plaza froze, their eyes locked on the soldier. A small child, startled by the noise, began to cry, and his mother quickly covered his mouth, her own face a mask of horror. Maya's camera dropped to her side, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan held his pose for a fraction of a second, the triumphant smile still frozen on his face. He was waiting for the explosion of cheers from his stream, for the virtual applause. But in the real world, there was only that heavy, suffocating, condemning silence. His smile wavered, then collapsed. A flicker of confusion entered his eyes, quickly followed by the dawning, chilling realization of what he had just done. The digital cheers felt a million miles away. Here, on this sacred ground, he was surrounded by a sea of shocked, disgusted, and furious faces. The silence was his verdict. For one long, eternal second, Sergeant Tom Rourke did not move. He remained a statue carved from duty, the echo of the impact still hanging in the air. But behind the reflective shield of his sunglasses, a war was being fought. The sharp, metallic ding was more than a sound. It was a key. It unlocked a steel door in his mind. He kept triple bolted and guarded. Instantly, he was no longer in Arlington. He was back on Route Irish outside of Ramadi, the air thick with sand and the coppery smell of fear. The sound was the same, the sharp ping of a sniper's bullet striking the armored plating of his MRAP, inches from his head. He saw the face of his friend, Corporal Dave Jensen, a kid from Wisconsin who hadn't been so lucky a week later. He remembered the promise they had all made in the dust and the blood, to live lives worthy of the ones they'd lost. This ground, this uniform, this sacred watch, it was for Dave. The clarity of his purpose cut through the shock like a laser. Then he moved. It wasn't a move born of anger or rage. It was an action of pure, unadulterated purpose. It was swift, economical, and utterly decisive, a physical manifestation of a lifetime of discipline. In a single, fluid motion that seemed to defy the laws of physics, he broke his 21-second pause, took one precise, powerful step forward, and closed the distance to Ethan. His white-gloved hand closed around Ethan's wrist, the one still holding the slingshot. The grip wasn't brutal, but it was as unyielding as forged iron. With his other hand, he plucked the slingshot from Ethan's grasp as easily as taking a toy from a toddler. His voice, when it came, was not a shout. It was low, controlled, and carried the chilling authority of a battlefield command. It sliced through the silence, each word a perfectly aimed shot. "This is not your playground," he said, his eyes, hidden but intensely felt, locking onto Ethan's. "And I am not your toy." The color drained from Ethan's face. His bravado, his entire online persona, shattered into a million pieces. The reality of his transgression crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. It was just, he stammered, his voice failing him. In that instant, Ranger Rossi and two other Rangers were there, flanking them. Her expression was grim, her professionalism absolute. "Sergeant," she said, her voice firm, "we have it from here." Sergeant Rourke released Ethan's wrist. Then, with a precision that was breathtaking to witness, he took one step back, executed a flawless turn, and resumed his post and his count as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. His silent, disciplined presence now dominated the entire plaza, a towering monument to the duty Ethan had so casually desecrated. As the Rangers began to escort a trembling, rubber-legged Ethan away, Mr. Jones stepped into his path. The old man's face was etched with a deep, sorrowful anger. His voice shook, not with age, but with the effort of controlling a righteous fury. "My brothers died for the ground you stand on," he said, his words landing like hammer blows. "They gave their lives, their futures, everything they had, so that you could have the freedom to be a fool. But they did not give you the right to play games on their graves." That was the final blow. Ethan finally broke. A raw, guttural sob tore from his throat. Tears of shame, fear, and utter humiliation streamed down his face. He looked at the faces around him. not the adoring faces of fans, but the contemptuous glares of judges, and saw only his own disgrace reflected back at him. From his post, Sergeant Rourke spoke one last time. His voice, clear and steady, carried across the silent plaza, a final, powerful lesson for everyone present. "We stand guard for them," he declared, "for the soldiers who gave their names, so the unknowns would never be forgotten. That is what this uniform means." His words hung in the cold November air, an irrefutable truth, a devastating indictment of an unforgivable act. In the sterile, quiet confines of the Arlington security office, the digital world of likes and shares evaporated, replaced by the unyielding reality of the United States Code. Ethan Vance, stripped of his phone and his audience, sat hunched in a chair, shivering. Maya sat beside him, weeping silently. Ranger Rossi calmly and methodically explained the consequences. Federal charges were being filed, interfering with a government ceremony, assault on a federal employee, and trespassing on a restricted federal site. The potential fines would obliterate any revenue his channel had ever generated. And the final, crushing penalty, a lifetime ban from every national cemetery and monument in the United States. His phone, now sealed in an evidence bag, was no longer a tool for fame, but a record of his crime. His viral moment had transformed into a permanent, digital monument to his own infamy. The video did go viral, but in a way that became Ethan's worst nightmare. News outlets and military veteran groups got a hold of mirrored clips. It was broadcast not as a prank, but as a sickening symbol of a cultural disease, the desperate, narcissistic pursuit of fame at the expense of honor, respect, and common decency. It ignited a fierce, nationwide debate about the responsibilities of online influencers and the erosion of sacred spaces. Overnight, Ethan "ETV" Vance became a household name, not as a star, but as a cautionary tale, a verb for public self-destruction. Days later, Mr. Jones returned to the tomb. The autumn air was colder now, the last of the red leaves clinging grimly to their branches. He stood for a long time, watching the unwavering sentinel pace his lonely watch. He then quietly placed a single white rose at the base of the plaza steps before turning to leave, his duty as a witness, and as a guardian of memory, fulfilled. Sergeant Rourke finished his rotation. Back in the quiet solitude of the barracks, away from the prying eyes of the world, he took out the dented silver star. He didn't try to fix it. He simply polished it, his motions methodical, his thoughts his own. In the soft lamplight, the faint scar on his jaw seemed to stand out, a quiet reminder of the world beyond the ceremony, of the violence that had forged his discipline. The dent in the metal was now a part of its story, a new scar earned not in a foreign war, but in a battle for honor on home ground. The seasons would change, but the watch at the tomb would not. A new guard now stood on the plaza, his steps as measured, his gaze as fixed as Sergeant Rourke's had been. The crowd still came, but a subtle shift had occurred. They stood a little further back. Their voices were a little more hushed. A young boy tugged on his father's sleeve and asked why the soldier never smiled. And his father, instead of shushing him, knelt down and explained, his voice filled with a newfound reverence, what it truly meant to stand watch over heroes. Ethan Vance came to Arlington seeking to be seen, and left with a devastating lesson in what it means to truly see. He learned that some things are not for content, not for views, and not for likes. They are simply to be honored in silence and with respect. If you believe that honor, courage, and sacrifice still matter, comment "respect" below to show your support for those who stand watch. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of what truly matters. And click the video on your screen now to see another story of duty and a choice that will leave you breathless.